Don't leave me to freeze, I'll give you a warm bed every night, begged the desperate Apache woman, her voice trembling in the dark wind like a frayed piece of cloth caught on a fence. Snow drifted sideways across the endless New Mexico plateau, a white storm swallowing sound, and her hands clutched the stranger's coat as though it were the last solid thing in a world dissolving around her. He had been riding alone for 3 days, chasing a contract that promised gold and glory, but he had not expected to find a lone woman kneeling in the snow at the edge of a canyon, her hair tangled with frost, her dark eyes burning like embers under the hood of a tattered blanket. The sky above was as black as iron, the stars hidden by cloud, and the only light came from the weak glow of his lantern swinging at his saddle. Please, she whispered again, her voice cracking. Please don't leave me here. The cold takes quick. I have nothing else but my body and my word. He stared down at her, his gloved hands stiff with cold, unsure whether he was staring at a living woman or some spirit risen from the rocks. The winter wind shrieked like a hawk. Her lips were blue, her fingers raw and bleeding from where the snow had eaten at them. This was Apache land, he knew it well enough to keep his distance, to ride hard and silent through it. Yet this woman, with her face carved by desperation and her promise hanging between them like a noose, struck a chord deep in him he couldn't name. He had seen poverty, starvation, and betrayal, but there was something in her voice that didn't sound like a trap. It sounded like an oath. The kind of oath you make when death is already standing at your shoulder. He dismounted, boots crunching in the snow, and her eyes flickered with a strange blend of hope and shame. How long have you been out here? He asked, his voice low, as if afraid of drawing the attention of the land itself. She shook her head weakly, unable to say. Her breath fogged the air like smoke. My people are gone, she murmured. The soldiers came. They burned everything. I ran. Her shoulders quaked beneath the blanket, and for a moment he saw not a woman but a child lost in an endless storm. I don't want to die out here alone. The way she said alone struck him like a bullet. He hesitated, scanning the ridges. He had heard the stories, a lone woman on the trail, a lure for ambush. But there was no movement in the snow, no shadow but their own. Only the vast silence of a dead winter. You'll freeze if you stay here another hour, he muttered, more to himself than to her. His horse stamped nervously, nostrils steaming. He threw back the flap of his saddlebag and pulled out an extra blanket, rough wool but dry. She reached for it with shaking hands, her fingers brushing his glove, and he felt the cold of her skin even through the leather. It was a cold that clung like grief. I told you, she said, her eyes searching his, I'll give you a warm bed every night. I'll cook, I'll tend the fire, I'll keep your camp safe. Just don't leave me to freeze. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she bowed her head, as if expecting him to ride away. The storm howled, and he thought of the miles ahead, of the gold he had been promised for finishing his job. He thought of the faces of the dead he had seen in other snows, their eyes frozen open. He crouched down, his knees sinking into the drift, and tipped her chin up with his gloved fingers. Her eyes were wet but defiant, like coals glowing under ash. You come with me, he said finally, the words sounding strange in his own mouth. But you stay close, you run, you steal, you lie, and I'll leave you behind. She nodded quickly, clutching the blanket around herself as if it were life itself. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something like relief flicker in her gaze, but also something deeper, a shadow, an old wound. He didn't ask. Instead he helped her to her feet, steadying her when her knees buckled. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, but her grip on his arm was fierce, the grip of someone who had clawed their way through death already. They rode through the night, the horse laboring under the extra weight, snow hissing against its flanks. The wind cut through his coat, but behind him she pressed close, her arms wrapped tight, her breath against his neck hot and rapid like an animal's. He told himself he had done a good deed, that she was no more than a survivor he'd taken pity on. But the words she had whispered echoed louder than the storm, I'll give you a warm bed every night. And beneath that promise he thought he heard another voice, older, heavier, the voice of the land itself, whispering of debts not yet paid. The storm finally broke just before dawn, leaving the land hushed and buried beneath a clean white shroud. The sun rose pale and distant, offering no warmth, only light enough to see the jagged skeletons of mesquite trees poking through the drifts. He rode until his legs felt carved from stone and his horse snorted clouds of exhaustion. At last, he found a cut in the rocks where the canyon wall opened into a shallow cave, shielded from the wind. He dismounted stiffly and helped the woman slide down. Her body trembled as though every bone inside her was trying to shake loose, yet she did not complain. She simply clutched the blanket tighter and moved when he told her to, her dark eyes watching him with a strange intensity, as if memorizing the way he carried himself, the way he touched his rifle, the way he tied his horse. Inside the cave, he built a small fire, coaxing sparks to life with flint and the last dry twigs he had stored away. The woman huddled close, her hands extended to the flame, the glow painting her face with amber shadows. For the first time he could see her clearly. She was younger than he had thought, perhaps no more than 20, her features sharp yet softened by hardship, her hair long and matted with snow but thick as a raven's wing. Across her neck was a faint scar, a line that looked old but deliberate, the mark of something she had endured in silence. She caught him staring, and for a moment she held his gaze without fear, as if daring him to ask. He did not. Some wounds are not meant to be spoken. He offered her a strip of dried meat and a piece of hard bread. She accepted with both hands, nodding once before eating with quick, desperate bites. Hunger had hollowed her, yet she carried herself with a kind of dignity that refused to break, even in rags and frostbite. When she was done, she pulled the blanket around her shoulders and leaned toward the fire, whispering words in a language he did not understand. Her voice was soft, melodic, like a prayer, and he wondered if she spoke to the fire itself, or to ancestors watching unseen. Then she glanced at him and said quietly in broken English, "You saved me. I keep my promise. You never sleep cold again." The words hung heavy between them. He shifted uncomfortably, pulling his coat tighter, unsure whether she meant them as gratitude, an oath, or something else. She lay down near the fire, her face half hidden by the blanket, and her breathing slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. He stayed awake long after, staring into the flames, listening to the crackle of wood and the faint whisper of wind beyond the cave. He thought of his contract waiting in Santa Fe, of the gold promised for delivering his goods across hostile land, of the soldiers who paid him to move quietly where others could not. He thought of how easily her presence could unravel it all. Yet when he turned his head and saw her sleeping, small and fragile against the vastness of winter, he felt something stir inside him that had been buried for years, the faint ache of responsibility, of tether, of a life beyond himself. By the second day of travel, she began to speak more. Her English was halting, but each word carried weight. She told him her name was Ahioka, meaning, she brought happiness, though she laughed bitterly at the irony. Her village had been forced off their land, driven like cattle by soldiers who promised safety but delivered only hunger and disease. The last raid had scattered them, and she had run, hiding in caves, eating roots and snow, until she had nothing left but the blanket on her back. Her voice did not tremble as she spoke, it carried the flat steadiness of someone who had learned to accept loss as a constant companion. He listened, saying little, though each word she gave him wrapped tighter around his mind, pulling him deeper into her story. That night, as they set camp beneath a grove of cottonwoods, she reached for his hand without warning. Her fingers were warmer now, but her grip was firm, almost commanding. "I keep my promise," she said again, her eyes shining in the firelight. "You save me, I save you. Always warm bed." He felt a chill unrelated to the weather. There was no jest in her tone, no trace of seduction. It was as if she had bound herself by something greater than choice, as if survival itself had demanded this vow. He pulled his hand back, uneasy, but the echo of her words followed him into sleep, wrapping around his dreams until he woke drenched in sweat, convinced she had whispered in his ear though she lay across the fire from him. On the third day, they crossed into harsher country. The snow thinned, revealing the dry red earth beneath, and the air carried the sharp scent of sage. He thought the worst of the journey was behind them, until he noticed the tracks. Hoofprints, half buried but fresh enough to raise alarm. He dismounted to study them, his brow furrowing. Soldiers, maybe 5 or 6 riders, heading north. He looked at Ahioka, and the way her face hardened told him she had seen them too. "They hunt," she said simply, her voice low. "Not deer, not buffalo. They hunt me." The truth slid into him like a blade. She was not merely a survivor, she was marked, pursued. To take her with him meant carrying her war, her enemies, her danger. And yet when she saw the fear cross his face, she stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "Don't leave me," she said, the words trembling but fierce. "I give you more than warm bed. I give you reason. I give you fight. Alone, you die cold. With me, you live." Her eyes burned like coals, and for the first time he wondered if he had rescued her at all, or if she had chosen him, claimed him, bound him in a way he could never unravel. That night, when he lay wrapped in his blanket staring at the endless stars, he knew sleep would not come easily. For now he traveled with more than a desperate woman. He traveled with a vow whispered in snow and fire, binding him to a fate he did not yet understand, but could feel tightening with every mile they rode.